if I'm wrong, and that's not a living human being according to medicine and science, then I shouldn't be out here, right? I mean, I'm not that dumb.
There's a difference, I think, between bias and propaganda.
And I would agree. So the heart starts beating at 21 days. So he goes into a textbook.
That's technically true.
Absolutely. Well, he actually looked it up.
I think there are cardiac cells that will act and will begin to fire electrically, but it's not a heart yet. So how do you set up something like this? I mean, do you get approval from the university?
Well, the only approval that we need is to let them know that we're coming on campus and we need a spot, and let them know when you set up something this big.
Sure,
but,
yeah, this is
elaborate. Right, but if it was something smaller, if we just came on with, small signs, you don't have to have a permit. The permit is just more of a formality because it's a free speech issue.
Sure. So what is it that you're hoping to accomplish here? Who's your audience?
Our audience is the students that are in the echo chamber, and to get them to realize...
And which echo chamber? Can you say a little more about that? What do you mean by that?
Echo chambers such as some of the things the guys were saying, where the one guy said, well, it's not a human being, it's a fetus.
Which one guy?
One of the students earlier in the conversation.
Oh, okay.
So when a student comes up and says, well, it's not a human being yet, or something like that, those are the students we're trying to reach. We're trying to say to them, hey, listen up. You've heard these phrases and these sentences and statements out there in the world and in the echo chamber. How about you think it through? Let's walk through that. Okay, it's not a human being, it's just a fetus.
Okay.
What does the word fetus mean?
Okay.
What is so we go that way, and so we have we kind of have a conversation that way, and so we dialogue that way.
Okay. So has anybody asked you about? So if we're talking about one echo chamber, surely another echo chamber may exist.
Oh yeah, UC Berkeley. We were just there.
Okay.
That's a big echo chamber.
So I guess that what I'm wondering is, has anybody ever asked you whether you might be in an echo chamber?
Oh, sure, of course, that's fair.
So how do you respond to that?
I say we all have to make sure we're not in an echo chamber. We have to make sure that we're not in an echo chamber. Now, if we are in an echo chamber, because we all are eventually at some point,
absolutely.
Whether it be at home or church or wherever,
Yes, it makes us uncomfortable to
absolutely
that we believe
absolutely
not true or wrong or wrong-headed.
No, I agree. So you just have to make sure that if you're going to be in an echo chamber, don't swallow things and just regurgitate them. Think about what you just heard. For an example, one of the students earlier said to me, well, it's not alive yet because its heart's not beating. And I said, well, do you know when its heart's beating? He goes, no. I go, well, then you just repeated something you heard. The heart starts beating at 21 days. So he goes into a textbook.
That's technically true.
Absolutely. Well, he actually looked it up.
There are cardiac cells that will act and will begin to fire electrically, but it's not a heart yet. It's a cardiac pole. It's something that will become a heart.
Yeah, and there's students that will say things like that, and I say there's a simple way to find out. Look it up. Don't accept what you heard. Or what he even actually had a quote from a doctor that said the heart starts beating at 22 days, and then the next statement the guy goes, but there's not actually a heart there. And I go, does that bother you? He goes, no, see, not till 20 weeks. I go, why are you so quick to jump on that statement when your medical textbook says the heart starts beating at 21 days? So, and then he goes, well, the brain waves, they're not. I said, well, we can measure brain function at 40 days. Now, it's not the brain like you and I have at this point. It's still in a lot of those firing mechanisms, but the heart is actually there. In fact, when you look on a ultrasound at 4, 5, 6 weeks along, if they get it just right, you can see that heart actually pumping. You can see the heart pumping, and you can hear it. So at 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, you see the heart in an ultrasound, you hear it beating. This doctor over here is incorrect. And he wanted to hold on to that echo chamber that he had. And I said, all I'm asking you to do there's more to this than meets the eye, and you got to think it through. So that's the audience that we're trying to get.
So your purpose here
Uh-huh.
is to get people thinking outside of the echo chamber. Is that?
If their echo chamber is saying things that aren't true. Now, some students come up and say, hey, my teacher said this and this. I say, yeah, that's actually true, and that's good. I just want them to question some of the information, because they're making their decision about whether or not abortion should be legal. They're basing that decision on false information.
I see.
And that's what bothers us. We're looking for those people that are making the wrong decision about abortion because of false information.
So you want people to question, you want people to think twice about the information that they
And
take
we
in.
want them to embrace
So
ending abortion
let me
in
ask you
America.
this. Is this overkill then for what you're trying to do? Because if what you want to do is have people question, then what's the purpose of the shock?
That's a good question. I would think I would think, number one, what would be the standard for if something's overkill or not? I mean, how would we decide what is overkill? Because
I'm gonna go with bloody fetal tissue being overkill.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
all right.
I don't think that's a question.
I can see where you get that. Here's what I would think. I don't think. I think it's really strong, and it could be overkill in some respects, but I think it's a real strong message to students, because many students will actually come up to us and say, I have never seen anything like this in my life. I took your brochure home and I read through it, and I came back the next day, and I want you to know that I looked through your information and I'm now pro-life. So for that person, seeing such a dramatic presentation, it maybe was overkill or maybe not. It was sure powerful. And I like what Martin Luther King said. He made a great line one time. He said, injustice must be shown, that words alone are not enough. You must show the injustice with all its tension and all its uncomfort. I thought that was a great line, and that probably describes what we're doing. Is that we're trying to say, look at the injustice. We need to stop abortion in America.
So, I guess, thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
no problem. No
I
problem.
appreciate that. I don't. What am I trying to say? I don't agree.
Right, I get it. I understand.
There's and certainly so this is not the kind of thing that would make me agree.
Right.
I guess is what I'm. So I'm not your target audience. But
well, you are, but I can see how if you already have a premise, if you already have a position, and this comes and contradicts that.
We've got a couple things going on here, right? So there's the argument that has to do with life beginning at conception and fetuses being human beings, and if that's true, then abortion must be murder. So there's that premise.
Yeah, and that's actually today, so far this morning, that's kind of been the direction most of the students have gone.
So, but then there's also, I think, and this is what I don't see here, is that your target audience is people who may be on the fence or are pro-choice. The people who are pro-choice.
Ultimately, generally, it's where our target audience is everybody. But if we narrowed it down,
that's poor rhetoric.
Well, no,
if your target audience is everyone, then that's just.
Well, no, I want well, I would say this here. I would explain. I believe that I want those who are pro-life on the campus, and we've had many of them thank us for being here today so far. And when they're a part, right? They're part of the target in the fact that I want them to stand up when they're in the dorm. I have students come up and say, listen, if I told my dorm mates that I'm pro-life, they badger me over that. They tell, how could you? And they shame me.
A lot of strong opinions.
Right. And so our target in that respect is to tell the pro-life student, be bold, get the information correct, because most pro-lifers don't know the correct information and they say really dumb things. So I said, know what you're talking about, and then also learn how to talk to your dorm mates and not go, well, I'm pro-life, and back off and say, well, let's talk about
I will
it.
agree with that.
Yeah.
So I guess that one thing that I think that you're missing here, if you're trying to address a target audience that has to do that is pro-choice,
Sure.
then one of the big things on the pro-choice side has to do with women's rights and women's bodily autonomy.
Sure.
So why not include something about that? Because one of the things that I try to tell my students is that you have to engage with what I call a naysayer, somebody who is going to disagree with you. You have to take that argument in and think about it and address it respectfully, and then refute it from a place of having considered it and looked at more than one side of the thing.
Sure.
So if it's true that you're trying to engage with that naysayer, why isn't there anything here about women's bodily sovereignty?
Well, I think we could probably, I think there are some, but
it's not obvious.
Right, but I think what would happen, and we have some on some of our literature as well, but I would agree with you that we want to talk about those issues. What's interesting, when we set up this display, we wind up talking about all those issues. So if somebody wants to dialogue with us, sometimes they'll start off with, well, it's not a human being, and we'll walk through that, and then they'll bring up, ultimately they'll say, well, it's a woman's right, and then we'll talk about that. So this kind of sparks the discussion, and then we do talk about all of those issues concerning women's rights and that
but
kind
in
of
order
thing.
for that conversation to happen, you have to rely on somebody being willing to come and talk to you about it.
Oh, and they are.
And some of them may not be, though. This may be something that is just too off-putting for some people.
Oh, no, and it is. It is.
So if you want,
I had a
want
woman.
that part of the conversation to be part of the conversation, whether somebody is willing to talk to you or not, then that might be something to consider as you're revising this based on the kinds of feedback that you.
Oh no, I agree. That's legitimate. We usually do get into those things. However, you could probably enhance it more by having that kind of thing. But what happens is, we had a student at American River College in California. She walked by from a distance. She didn't actually come up and talk to us, but she walked by from a distance. And 2 years later, we were setting up on the campus, and she walked up to me and she said, you guys were here 2 years ago. And I said, yes, we were. She goes, well, I just want you to know, I was walking by and I looked and I saw what an abortion was. And I went home and I told my fiance and my mom, I'm canceling my abortion appointment. I'm not going to have an abortion because I saw what an abortion is. And so her fiance said, okay, I'll take responsibility. And they did all their thing. She goes, I have a little 2-year-old child at home that I love with all my heart. And she goes, I just want you to know that I don't want you to stop doing what you're doing because you changed my mind just with your pictures.
And
so I
that's
get those.
the thing.
I get those.
I respect absolutely a woman's right to choose to have a child. I just don't know. I don't know that we can legislate that. That, for example, my tax dollars and your tax dollars go toward funding the military that carries out wars. People die in those wars.
Yeah.
My taxes fund prisons that perform capital punishment. I'm against capital punishment. I'm against people dying in wars. So,
by the way, I'm for prison reform big time. It's just,
great.
Oh
That's
man,
great.
It's a mess.
So if we're concerned about tax dollars funding, because I assume that that's part of your goal here is to talk about Planned Parenthood and what they do and whether they should receive federal funding for these kinds of things.
Well, I think we're kind of
lost my train.
Well, yeah, we're kind of we're in the ballpark. We're in the ballpark, but we're kind of what we do is we start from square one. We want people to know if they're pro-choice, why are they pro-choice? And if they're pro-life, why are you pro-life?
Sure.
And when they start giving us false information or irresponsible rhetoric, we just simply say to them, hang on a second, let's back up here and
that's what I was going to ask
let's
you.
Walk through this again.
Irresponsible rhetoric?
Not at all.
Is this
not at all.
irresponsible rhetoric because shocking? Well, I don't see any source citation.
Truth. Would you agree? Truth is shocking. Truth can be really shocking.
Okay.
I was before you. I was long before you. Right. I was long before you. And example of shocking. one of the main ingredients that ended the Vietnam War, of which I was going to wind up having to go. I was going to graduate from high school in 74. Fortunately, it ended in 72, so I wound up not having to go. But, and I don't know that I would have wanted to go at all, but in the early 70s and the late 60s, what was it that was stirring the American public so much to get us out of the war? There were things like...
There were several factors.
Right, there were. But one of the factors was that showing that Vietnamese guy shooting that Viet Cong kid in the head. Remember that famous picture?
Yes.
That's shocking to me, but it was part of the movement to get us out of Vietnam. The thing that bothered me as a kid the most was them showing the body bags and zipping up the body bags and bringing all these Americans. That was shocking, heart-wrenching stuff that played a key role in ending our involvement in the Vietnam War. So, yes, shocking, yes. Pretty over the top? Yes. But here's the kicker. Though sometimes those things need to be done. We've killed 62 million little boys and girls in abortion clinics.
See?
62 million.
There.
And that bothers me.
So, sure. I can understand that.
Right, from my perspective.
From your perspective, yes. Based on your definitions.
Well, no. Which gets to
the... You can still argue about that.
Right.
There are still doctors who believe that a fetus is not a person.
Correct. And there were doctors who believed black people weren't fully human.
There are still doctors, weirdly, who believe
absolutely.
This whole racial bias going on.
Absolutely.
That's a whole other argument.
And those guys are morons for believing that.
Where do you get these pictures? I don't see any source citations.
Well, you can go to abortionno.org.
Sure.
And he has the documentation for all the pictures.
That's not exactly an unbiased source, is it?
Well, you can go check it out.
What I mean is, why, if where you're getting these pictures is not an unbiased source, then why do you trust that?
Well, that's a good question. The interesting thing is, all information that we get in coming to us in everything in life has a bias.
There's a difference, I think, between bias and propaganda.
And I would agree. So something being biased is not necessarily wrong, because we're all biased. Is our bias based on reason and logic, or is our bias faulty based on false premises?
Yes, I would agree.
Would that make sense? Yeah.
But if you're going to produce sound rhetoric, then it ought to be as agendaless and as unbiased as possible. What you're presenting here is not that.
I would somewhat disagree. I would partly agree with you, but I would somewhat disagree with you, because you're now setting the standard of what makes something legitimate or not. And I'm saying, shouldn't our standard for what's right and wrong something we both agree on? For example, let's go to a specific thing. Earlier you said, well, we would probably disagree on whether or not a fetus is a human being or not.
Yes.
Okay, so then as you and I would disagree on that, how would we, unbiasedly as we could, how would the two of us figure out who's right on that?
So that is an interesting question.
That would be the question.
And I think that this goes back to the question of bias. So my understanding is that there's generally a religious kind of bias that goes with these kinds of anti-abortion arguments. Am I correct in thinking that? Or
there can be, but I would also add to that, to be fair, there can also be an anti-religious bias on the other side, right?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I don't know that that's where we would want to go. I think where we'd want to go is, let's not say the Bible says so for now. Let's just not say that. Let's say, what is the definition of fetus? An objective definition of fetus.
Yeah, and so can we arrive at that? And I think we have to look to science to arrive at that.
Correct. So, because that's important, right?
What we have here is that there are two different scientific definitions.
Of what?
Of whether a fetus is a human being.
Where did you get that?
So you seem to have doctors, if I remember correctly, earlier when we were talking, you cited doctors who said that the fetal heartbeat determines when the fetus is a human.
Well, no, a student was saying that to us earlier.
Oh, I gotcha.
He was saying, so if we look up the word fetus, and we go to the biology department, we go anywhere on the campus, and we ask the medical experts here on campus, what is the actual objective definition of fetus? Not the pro-life, pro-choice. What does the actual medical term fetus mean? And when the doctor or when the professor says to you, the word fetus is a Latin word which means little one. It was used in a, that's actually the definition. When you look at the word fetus, when the medical community uses the word fetus, they're using it to describe a stage of development of the living human being. Okay? So, ma'am, did you have any questions at all? Because he would be glad to talk to you if you had. I didn't want to ignore you. I'm sorry. You could talk to her if you want. Okay, thank you. We'll be here all day. I didn't mean to ignore her. She was busy listening.
Well, I thought she might have been interested in what we were saying.
Yeah, I thought so too. She seemed to be for a while. But the word fetus means little one. Well, then why does the medical community describe that 8 weeks on as fetus? Why do they do that? Well, the reason they're doing that is for clarity. If you're talking about, hey, boy, I got a little toddler at home. Well, we know exactly what you mean. Or we have a newborn at home. So it's a term to describe a stage of development of the human being. So now we have a problem because the pro-choice position is it's not a human being, it's a fetus, is an incorrect statement. And that's the problem. I didn't come up with the definition of fetus. The medical community did. And when the medical community said a fetus is a human being at the earliest stages of its life, before that an embryo and a zygote, those are all human beings in the earliest stage of their life. And I'm going, well, that's what medicine and science says. I'm in. Because the pro-choice side improperly uses the word. So if you and I are standing here listening to the discussion, somebody's not being intellectually honest. Now, they really believe what they believe, but they're not being honest. They're using the word, or it's just a parasite. We get that every once in a while.
Well, okay.
But see, a parasite, I look at them, the student, when they said, well, it's a parasite. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to deny its humanity to justify killing it. And they basically say yes. And so that's where we would come from.
Gotcha.
Is that standpoint. If I'm wrong, and that's not a living human being according to medicine and science, then I shouldn't be out here. Right? I mean, I'm not that dumb. Yeah, I'm not that dumb.
Validly, yes, I would say so.
Right. You and I would both agree we shouldn't be out here.
I would agree with that.
However, if you are incorrect about the definition of a fetus, would you be willing to rethink your position?
Yes, absolutely I would.
And that's,
if I am incorrect about that, I will rethink that.
And that's the way we both should be.
So here's something though that I don't think either of us could argue about. There should be fewer abortions.
Before we get there, I think it's foundational that we identify what an abortion is. Because if we don't agree on what an abortion actually is, then to answer that question, there should be fewer of them. Well, who cares if I don't know what an abortion is? Now, back when abortion became legal when I was in high school, I didn't really have a clue what abortion was. So when somebody says...
I see what you're saying. No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That is a fine argument. I like that argument because it's an argument of definition.
Right.
And as people engaging in rhetoric in good faith,
right,
we ought to define our terms as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Okay. I agree.
That's fair.
I'm with you.
I think I may have actually run myself out of time. I've got a class I got to teach.
It's
but
11:07.
Is it? Okay, yeah, I should have been somewhere about 10 minutes ago, but that's okay.
Are they sitting in class going,
No.
She's out there. She's out there taking on the pro-life guys.
Oh, am I taking you on? Is that what's happening here?
That's what they're saying. They're going,
it's not.
She's out there laughing with the pro-life guy.
How dare she? What a bad liberal.
Yeah, that's right. Don't go into class now. You're in trouble.
She's talking to those people. How terrible.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with you, but
I appreciate
support
the
your right
dialogue.
to be here and do this.
I appreciate the dialogue very much.
Yeah,
we'll
me
be
too.
here today and tomorrow.
Okay.
So thank you.
What's the camera for? Is that what that is?
We use it as a form of protection because rarely, not like this, these kids are really cool, but once in a while you get someone that comes up and tries to grab you or spit on you or something like that, and they're less likely to do it if they know they'll be on tape, and so we kind of film our thing. But I enjoyed it.
Anyway.
Good to meet you, Professor. Take care. Have a good day.